Our online lecture, Dr. Irina Sedakova from Institute for Slavic Studies, Russian Academy of Science, is among us. She is our good friend and dear colleague, and she's going to talk about the old and new sociocultural values in Russia and Bulgaria. Just for information, I have to add that your microphones are switched off during the lecture, and afterwards, for discussion, you just click the raise hand button and ask your question you have, want to ask. And let's begin, please, Irina.
Yes. Good morning, dear friends. It's a great honor for me to give a talk in my beloved Tartu and the Estonian Museum. And it's a great joy to see you, and at least virtually. And I hope one day we'll meet up in real life. Thank you so much. The topic I'm covering today is huge. So, since I've been studying values for over 15 years, and I can see the dynamics of them in Russia and Bulgaria, and I can see them in various contexts. I'll give sort of a resume of our study, which interestingly enough, we started 3 years ago. It's a joint project of Russian, Bulgarian, and Slovak colleagues who got a research grant to study how to say an interesting aspect of the values called by the foundation traditional and non-traditional values. I apologize, this is my first online lecture when I don't see people in real life, and it is in English, so I apologize for some failures and chaotic presentation maybe. So it's my initiation. So what is interesting in this topic, which we have been studying with my Bulgarian and Russian and Slovak colleagues, this is the term non-traditional values. I do not know how it's in Estonia, but in Russia, non-traditional values alludes to gender topics and to LGBT mostly. So I try to avoid these topics because I'm not involved in studies and investigation of gender and Russian traditional views and official views on LGBT, so I will avoid those topics and will talk on the topics we do study. These are old and new values as we can see them in rural settings and in mostly urban, modern settings and on the internet. This is the plan, sort of a plan of my lecture. And I'll start with terminology and key problems, which I cover today. And then I'll have a closer look to the border, if it is any, between old and new values. I will speak a bit of the value itself on the examples of love and old age. And in my conclusion, I'll give several reasons for dynamics of hierarchy of values in our countries, and I think globally. But those things like distinctive features and the reasons for dynamics will go through the whole lecture because I can't avoid it. It's they have penetrated in every single subject I study. So, terminology. This is the key issue for my study. Axiology started as a philosophical discipline, but during the last several decades, it has embraced all humanitarian and social studies. And the axiological terms undergo considerable transformations in the historical change of any language and its society. In English and French languages, value etymologically comes from Latin valere, to be worth of. It used to be a term of economic studies. The actual meaning of axiology, social principle, kind of a term of axiology, dates back just to 1918 in England. Same processes are typical for the Slavic languages, and I am sure for Estonian language as well. But this process took place even later. It is a very interesting topic for comparative linguistics. I am a linguist, ethnolinguist, but such a study hasn't been accomplished yet. The history of the lexical coverage of the notion value in Slavic languages. In Russian and Bulgarian, it sounds like ценности. In Slovak, hodnoty and cennost. In Polish, wartości shows different ways of compiling the national vocabularies. The usage of various Old Slavic roots like cen in cennosti or hod in Slovak and Czech as well, and borrowings like in Polish, wartości. This is from German wert. In Russian and Bulgarian language, where the cultural and economic vocabularies are very similar, but still differ, the lexical designation of values coincides and correlates with price, цена, bargain, Bulgarian verb ценя, to bargain, and what is expensive in material as well as dear as emotional and spiritual aspects. Dictionaries published in the 19th century and during the socialist period do not present semantics of social importance at all. Just several examples. According to the Bulgarian language dictionary compiled by Lubomir Andreichin in one volume, 1973, value has an exclusively material meaning, a valuable item, but not money, treasure, price, cost. In post-Soviet times, the term appears in its metaphoric social meaning. Here I'll give a Russian example. Ценность, price, cost, but also property, and usual in plural form, ценности, item or phenomenon which is important and significant, like cultural values, spiritual values, and material values. Thus, the word denoting thus, the word denoting value as notions, axiological notions in Russian and Bulgarian language of the 19th, 20th centuries were used by no means in the same sense as they function in present-day discourse. There is a huge difference, and I'll try to show it. Now they function as a term which designates its own block of phenomena and characteristics. The new discourse has to do with the development of technologies, the internet, the new sincerity, new ethics, fashion and Western influence and other factors. The discourse of the values nowadays has to do with our experience in our fieldwork. For example, when we are in our fieldwork in Russia, in rural areas of Russia and Bulgaria, we will hardly hear love, family, respect, honesty in answers to our question, what are your values? Our elder interlocutors will probably mention a ring inherited from my mother, or perhaps a house, land, or some other items or objects. So when we ask elder people, we do not use this word as a term. What are your values in the field? We try to use different idioms and constructions. For instance, what is important, relevant, significant for you? What is dear for you? Or, for example, what is the main principle of family life or upbringing children? Or what for what do you respect another person? We never use values as a term. For me, it is an artificial working term if it is applied to a traditional folk culture. In urban or internet discourse, the personal, official business values are openly manifested, so we can use this term as a term. And here is one of the borders between old and new values, which have to do with the terminology. Value as an artificial term for the rural settings and as a normal, so to say, term for the modern society. In the modern discourse, the term values is eroded. Its semantic and pragmatic volumes are vague or hyperinflated. It has become just a convenient word for designation of one's position, whatever it may be. Values has passed into a proxy word. It can be a symbol of Weltanschauung, a perception of the world, or a code of opinions on everyday behavior. The frequency of these words, ценности, мои ценности, in Russian and Bulgarian is quite high. Today, values in Russian and Bulgarian is the umbrella synonym for words of partly similar or close meaning. Depending on context, the word values may be used for the designation of views, ideas, or mental set in political or historical discourse, virtue, laws in religious discourse, rules of life, beliefs in personal private discourse, intentions, resolutions, principles, messages in business, and some others. Values appear in the current texts of various genres, in oral speech, in jokes, anecdotes, and very serious neo-aphorisms. In general, the blurred characteristics of values is underlined in any kind of discussions. Just one example. You once said that your values, whatever you may think, were rather simple. You were with those who wished good to my people, to Russian. This is a quotation from an interview with a very outstanding journalism of our days in Russia, Anton Krasovsky. So values, whatever you can mean by this. What sort of methodology and data am I using? There are several academic fields. and one of which I am mentioning all the time. This is Ethnolinguistics as presented by Moscow or Slavic school, established by Nikita Ilyich Tolstoy. With its developed set of methods and approaches toward the multifaceted data, language, folklore, and ethnographic issues. This is the leading discipline for me, being an ethnolinguist. Evaluation of phenomena, subjects, actions, actors, and properties, be it explicit or implicit, is a distinctive feature of the language world view or picture of the world. For research, the comparative investigation of values in European countries according to certain ethnolinguistic, but Polish ethnolinguistic and sociolinguistic scholarly procedure, which is carried out within the framework of Euro-YOS, an international project under the supervision of Jerzy Bartmiński, Lublin, Poland, the founder of the Lublin Ethnolinguistic School, which differs a bit from the Moscow one, is very significant. Another important scholarly methodology is the combination of comparative and semiotic approaches. The semiotic binary positions are a significant tool for any kind of axiological, comparative, and not only research. To discover the hidden values, the researcher can start with an examination of an anti-value, the second part of the opposition. Like to study life, we can first investigate death. Same with health and illness, and there are many other examples. Data which I'm using is first of all the language, because language has so many means to evaluate, so it is the backbone of the data. It defines and manifests the values. Many folklore genres, such as proverbs, curses, personal narratives, and good wishes, demonstrate the values explicitly. Ethnographic evidence like rituals, recommendations, and bans allow the researcher to see the values through the explanations and reasoning. Now a very short, a very brief comparative data between Russia and Bulgaria. There are mutual characteristics for two countries and their languages and culture. They both languages come from Old Slavic origin. Both people are religious, mostly into Eastern Orthodox Church, though there are Muslim and, of course, Jewish religions in the territory of the countries. Russian and Bulgarian languages use Cyrillic alphabet, and they both have common socialist past. And official language, langue de bois, is similar for the Russian, Soviet, and Bulgarian past. But Bulgaria had a shorter period of Soviet influence for 40 years, while Russia and the USSR had survived 70 years. It's a very important difference in generations and the way of influence into the traditional culture. What are the differences? They mostly deal with Bulgarian country and language. It's 50 years of Turkish yoke in Bulgaria and the Balkans. In Bulgaria, industrialization has been very late, so patriarchal mentality. I hope my Bulgarian colleagues won't be cross with me, but they still have it, a patriarchal mentality even in the cities. Bulgaria, as a Balkan country, has close historic contacts and influences with other Balkan countries, and the Bulgarian language is part of Balkan language union, which is very different from the Slavic language family. Many Arabian and Turkish and all Balkan borrowings are in the lexicon of the Bulgarian language. And now Bulgaria is a member of European League. So if we read newspapers during the Soviet times, and even now, the official language is very similar. Bulgarian to the Russian ones. But when we talk to Bulgarians, when we can hardly understand them. And Turkish and Balkan mentality has influenced the system of values a lot. And now I'll give just one example, being so theoretical. I'll give one example which I like very much. This is a quotation from a recent interview with an old lady, old Baba, which is in Bulgarian old lady, grandmother, Severina, in her 90s. What is the secret of your that long life, Granny? I have not done evil things to anybody. I was always kind. I have not closed the door in front of any stranger. I have always asked whether he or she was hungry. I do not have enemies. I do not hate anybody. Lord has given to me a long life. I cannot tell you anything else. I have not been to a doctor. I do not hate this world. This is an example of data. First of all, this is a narrative, a biographical narrative. This is definitely an axiological attitude to the reasons why the lady lives that a long and healthy life. And this is partly methodology because we come from the negative things. So the lady hasn't done evil things to anybody. She hasn't closed the door. She doesn't have enemies and she doesn't hate anybody. This is the folk philosophy which gives us a lot to study values. So where is the border between the old and new values? Of course, there are basic values like life itself, health, and family and love, etc., etc. They are basic values which stay in the modern society, but as I will show, hopefully, they change their discourse and their contact. I think that there is not a distinct border between these two categories. They often overlap. The border is not a line, it is a zone, a belt where old and new values coexist until the new ones overtake the whole space, or they can state like pagan and Christian values mixed into so-called dvoeverie in Russia and other countries. They coexist. Still, we can talk about new modern values as they are often articulated and even listed. It appears that the border between traditional and non-traditional values, here I use this term non-traditional values, lies in the use of vocabulary. And the vocabulary is different. I am sure it is the same with the Estonian language. The slang of older and younger generations is different, and it reflects the discord between generations, as Amanda Grenier states. The new values in Russian and Bulgarian are mostly foreign English American words, and they are borrowed from the glossaries of business and pop psychology, as I call it, since the psychology is very fashionable now in Russia, and every younger person uses these words, my trauma, my comfort zone, etc., etc. Such values as self-fulfillment, comfort, creativity, career, success, productivity, leadership, competence, information, hype. I don't know whether it has penetrated in Estonia. Do you have hype as agiotage? At least in Russia, they are very frequently mentioned. They are articulated, as I said. They are not hidden. The new sincerity and the cult of ego, the language of the advertising, the I, me, my attitude influenced the array of new egocentric values. Here is a list. Actually, consists of 240 values. It is borrowed from American psychological discourse, and it shows the values, and it is a good example of what I already mentioned, the umbrella term of value covering very different properties, such as adequacy, ambition, balance for meditation, for example. Is it really a value? It is something different, but it is called a value nowadays. This list of values needs a separate lecture, so I will go further and we'll talk a bit about the values, which is very important for the characterization of generations. And we can see here the dynamics of traditional and non-traditional values. You know that generations are called by some alphabet letters, and generation X, for example, represents people born from 1964 through 1984. Their value is their uniqueness. It is important for them to be unlike anybody. Now we're talking about other generations born in the era of internet and all sorts of gadgets. Their values are different and their competences are different. Intergenerational conflicts of all times, multiplied by the differences in religious or ideological views, are based on the opposition of values. Here is an example from my field research in Bulgarian villages populated by old believers. In Bulgaria, in the 1960s, the youth protested against strict principles and the convictions of senior old believers, so their values were different. There were, for elder people, there were bans on certain clothing and prayer rules and churches, and women, especially women, had dresses. Confessional and family values were challenged. Young believers accepted modern socialist then life principles and were ready to behave like everybody else in the schools around them. However, when I met those people back in 2010, those who denied their faith, the church and rise, they came back to the old believers' values, and they became older and they came into conflict with the next young generation. And we see it in many other societies, confessional societies as well, the conflict between generations based on their values. Now I come to the third point, and this is distinctive features of a value. I mentioned already that it depends on personal values and generational values, but it depends also on contexts. It has ambivalent features. It correlates with other values. It has grades, and values can turn into an anti-value. Here I do not have time, unfortunately, to tell you about an etiologic legend which exists in Bulgarian folklore. I just mentioned that when there is an etiologic legend, it explains something very important. And here, this legend, maybe at the end I'll quote it, notes when the love goes beyond the borders and it becomes too passionate, then it's not good enough. So this shows the grades of the concept of love, and it shows its importance. It's a very high position in hierarchy of positions. But speaking of contexts, of course, we can talk of different notions of love. Let's say Christian love, as it is shown in the religious written texts and the core of the Christian Bible and other texts. But I will talk about human life. And here we can speak that of axiology of life as dependable on many parameters and attributes. Just compare early love and late love, first love and last love, mutual love, legal life and illegal love, unhappy life, forbidden love, with a person of other religion, ethnic group, or status. Love correlates with fundamental binary positions like life and death. Love can give life, but it can take life in case of unhappy love, and we know of suicides, etc., etc. It also gives happiness and it gives unhappiness. It is healthy and it is unhealthy. It correlates with health and illness. It correlates with chaos and order. Chaos if it's outside the marriage, and order if it's in the family. The same with moral and immoral, and sinless and sinful. Love is linked to fidelity as well as to jealousy and faithfulness, and is opposed, to lack of love or hatred. Love can turn into anti-value in an illness, and all folklorists know that it can be seen in the rural settings as a mental and even physical disease. Charms against crazy love or love with a demonic evil spirit are known in many folklore texts, and there are magic acts to make somebody feel passionate love as an illness for a certain person outside of a marriage or before wedding, etc., etc. I left one example in Russian because it loses many interesting features when it is translated into English. This is about, so to say, traditional love in a family. How is love to your wife is expressed? The first Russian woman ethnographer back in 1904. This is Olga Semyonovna Tianshanskaya. This question I was interested in for a long time, and I thought that there are no expressions of such a love because there are no tenderness between so to say, open tenderness between husband and wife, even among the newlyweds. But in recent times, I think differently. Then she talks about a remarkable Petrucha who expresses his life to his wife in a domestic way. He flies to the village to do something what his wife asks for. And there is a quote from his words. She decided to do something like millet to tie, but I see that rain is coming, so I mow down a plot. So assistance, help is the basic for love. What can we see now? And this is the change of an old value, love, as help and assistance, to something from internal to external. And again, language helps us. Love, любовь, and obich in Bulgarian, and now it's romance, romantika. Even 30, 40 years ago, in Russian language, romantika denoted something different, never some romantic relationship. So this is an example of an old value a bit changed. It changed its new connotation. It takes new connotations and a new term like romance, which has never existed in Russian for this type of relations. Now I'll talk about old age, another very important value for rural settings. And here I'll talk a bit more shortly, because I do not have time. I have studied this notion for several years, and I can see the changes which take place in front of our eyes. The transformation of the traditional value of old age is very sensible. In our time, even before the pandemic, in the advertising, recruiting, etc., old age is drawn back. It is denied. People fight against it with all sorts of cosmetic means, etc. And they declare possibilities of legendary longevity. You know that now people declare that we can easily live up to 120 years. While in the traditional worldview, growing up and aging of a human being are inescapable natural processes, and elders bear values. Of course, there is ambivalent attitude to the value of old age. On the one hand, in the traditional worldview, old age correlates with wisdom and experience, and we all know the tales that old people once upon a time were killed, but then wisdom saved the life of an old person, and since that time people do not kill the old people anymore. But wisdom is opposed to the loss of cognitive abilities, the decrease of physical strength, lots of illnesses, and decline of performability and productivity, as we say it now. Due to such characteristics, the concept of old age receives exactly opposite appraisals. It turns into anti-value from sacralization of old age. According to folklore legends, the Lord and Saint Nicholas walk around the earth in the appearance of old people to examine the human beings in their kindness and assistance and so on. So old people are the demons. We know that the evil spirit of the woods or of the waters are shown in the images of old men and old women. This is the binary opposition which shows us the possibility of a value to turn into its anti-value. So I'll give some examples of proverbs on old age, and they are in Russian and Bulgarian. When a person becomes old, he or she is very clever or very dumb. This is a Bulgarian proverb, if you listen to an old person, you will never have a headache. So this is the wisdom of the old people. But the opposite, the old age comes and the funny things start. Another, Bulgarian proverb showing that the old people are the fundament of the family and of the society. When an old person dies, the basis of the house falls down. And the tradition, all the principles come from the old people. This is a very important value, like the Russian old believers, which I put down in Romania. I am doing everything as my granny has taught me. And I mentioned wisdom, but now information is a new value. It's actually not a very new value. Knowledge is the traditional, znание is the traditional value in the rural settings, and we know wise people who know how to make people healthy, etc., etc. I'll give some examples, not from Russian or Bulgarian authors, but from, so to say, global philosophers and priests. This is a very popular book in Russia now by Atul Gawande, and it's #1 on Amazon list on aging. Here is the quote: "Nowadays, old age has stopped being a rare treasure. There was a time when we had to grapple with thorny questions when addressing elders, but now we address Google. And if we have a problem with the computer, we seek help from an adolescent, not from an elder." So now the teenagers are sort of a value as the keepers of this technique working with the gadgets. But another quote from a wonderful book which is also translated into Russian now and is very popular. This is the book by the priest and philosopher John Donahue, Anamkara, Book of Celtic Wisdom. And it alludes, of course, to the old values. This is a dubious question, though this is my thought about wisdom and information, because getting information and getting wise advice are different in their axiology, as argues the Irish philosopher, who puts many positive suggestions in the appraisal of wisdom and experience as intrinsic merits of old age. So information is not opposed to wisdom. It gives additional features to wisdom, and wisdom stays a very important value which characterizes older people. And now very short conclusions. I tried to show the dynamics of values, and now I'll show it on the notion of health, just several words. There are so many factors which change the people's attitudes to life and its values. Religion, ideology, economy, fashion, personal growth and aging, tragic events like war or pandemic, which we are witnessing now, are among them. Talking of the basic value health, I will mention the global fashionable movement of using healthy food, going to fitness and sporting in the fresh air. In Russian, there is a abbreviation ЗОЖ, здоровый образ жизни, healthy way of life. And there are shops, etc., etc. And now it comes like a traditional value with new content and new terminological lexis. But I will give another example demonstrating the dynamics of values, which is a topical one. I will finalize my talk with the expression stay healthy, known in many languages as a cliché to say goodbye, or as a toast to your health, or as a good wish where health is the basic value. It used to circulate as an automatic, in our modern society, as an automatic polite reply without allusion to its literal semantics. Stay healthy, don't get ill. In the time of the pandemic, the spread of COVID-19, the value of health has gained its maximum relevance, and as such, the language reflects it. We say and we mean, stay safe and healthy. Thank you so much for your attention, and here is the list of bibliography.
Thank you.
Now I can see you, not my presentation.
Thank you, Irina, very much for your very interesting presentation. And now time has come for questions and comments, examples, etc. Please click the raise your hand button, and our technical support will let you online. Please.
May I ask a question? Those online are still. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting to listen to it. I have actually two questions. One of them, maybe I have missed it, but how do you distinguish between like this value is old and this value is new? So do you have some like generational divide? If a person is say like over 60, then he or she is bearer of old values, whereas all the under 60s, their values are new by definition? Or do you kind of have a mental list of these values are like the ones that were also there in the tradition, in the like 19th century society? So it doesn't matter whether the person is 20 years old or, I don't know, or 70 years old. If he or she says that love is about caring and about helping, then it means that this person has all values, no matter what their age is.
So this is the first question. And you have another one. Thank you so much. It's a very important question, and it's difficult to say, to give just a very short answer. I said that a border between old and new values is actually very vague. So we can see people who are young, very young, and they are, so to say, old-fashioned. They share old values. And the main trend which we see now is the generation which shares new values, which I mentioned as prolongation of old values, but a bit modified. Health, but in another form of healthy food. For example, and it is a very important because it influences our ritual life. For example, when a granddaughter or a grandson comes to Christmas supper to the granny, and she gives a lot of bread and, so to say, fat food, the young person wouldn't eat it. This is a conflict between generations. But when this young person gets older, maybe he or she would change their values, as I showed. So it's such a vague thing. It's all very conventional. But it's maybe it's better to investigate with sociologists who can give us some statistics and with their interrogations.
Another question? Yeah, thank you. And another question was, you mentioned that some demonic creatures in Slavic folklore, they resemble old people. But we also know of other demonic creatures that resemble young people instead. Like, for example, the mermaids. Let's take the most obvious example. Why do you think some demonic creatures are modeled after old people and the others are modeled after young people? Why does it happen?
The system of demonological creatures is very complex. There are even small babies with changelings, you know, so they actually repeat our society. There are old people like Leshi, Vodinoi. In Bulgaria, there is the spirit of a well, Baba Gulta, who can eat a baby, or if he or she comes to a well, and they are always shown with long hair and very ugly, so to say, and they are scary. So the old people in this case have the functions to frighten people. Rusalki, as you know, they have other functions. They fall in love with mortal people, etc., etc. So it repeats the real life society.
Thank you.
More questions? Mario has a question.
I have not a question, but I don't know, Irina, maybe there was kind of norms. You cannot demonstrate your open emotions, and sometimes you cannot say to other people what you are thinking. And thank you very much for using proverbs. So I thought about Estonian. I'm sure that Piret can say that it's not only Estonian proverb. I tried to translate it is very difficult to grow old, but your life as old person is good. It is something which is always when you are saying. I remember when I was student and my lecturer said the proverb. I was somehow frustrated. I cannot understand what is behind this saying. But obviously, I think that behind this proverb is that actually the society is accepting you as an old person who has a knowledge and who can demonstrate all kind of basic values or basic skills for a younger generation, and somehow you are preserved and you are safe and saved in your family or in society. I don't know, maybe you can comment, maybe.
Old age and aging is such a big topic nowadays, you know, with all those restrictions to hire old people, and with all the complaints that young people change their workplace every 2 years and many other things. I would I would mention another thing which is for me is very important. I have a huge collection of proverbs on old age and I just didn't have time to show it. And not only proverbs, but narratives, when people just comment on their life, old people comment on their life. It always, the value of old age always depends on the optics, whether the society evaluates the person and how the society evaluates the person, and the inner evaluation. For example, old people could say, I'm so old, I'm good for nothing, I'm only a burden for you, and all our notes, field notes, are full with these complaints of elder people, you know. But then we'll have the comments of their relatives when they would say, you are never a burden to us, you are so precious for us, dear mommy, just stay, just be healthy, etc., etc. But proverbs and many other things are so important, like, for example, religious legends showing God and saints walking on earth, examining people. It's a very important and interesting thing for axiology. And of course, it's very interesting to compare with the Estonian state of axiology, so to say. Do you also have all those borrowed words like competence in our university life? You have to describe the new competences of students, etc., etc. Do you also use them? Or do you use Estonian words for this?
Sometimes yes, but not for all things. And of course, there are very, very funny things like your career. Yes, your model of your career.
Yeah.
Ministry of Education, for example, is dictating that you must move on the level of your career, and it means that when you got your like research professor or leading researcher or even senior researcher, I mean, it means that the next step is that you must go to a position of head of institution, or to go outside, to go to and start as bank leader or leader of manufacturing and so on and so on. So it's somehow like a progressive geometrical progression, yes, the modal, and there is no time to stop and to have kind of advanced skills or to learn something or to go deeper. But it's Russian high. And at the same time, everybody knows that in society and in real life, the modal is actually triangle, yes. And not all people can rush to the top of the triangle. I mean, it means that it's, I think, too much frustration is predicted for your life, work life, and also for your studies.
Yes.
I think we have what Mare described. A very good term is cult of success or something.
I just wanted to say about success. It's everywhere. Yes, успех in Russian, which is a Russian word. It's not borrowed. Success, успех. So here, my observation that the new values bring in new terms does not work. Успех, it's part of an old language as well. Успех, success. So everybody wants success. And it correlates. I had a paper on this notion, success. What are the old synonyms of success as it is seen now, and how it's been seen in rural tradition. And there are people who were talented. Talent is another new value, talent. And people who are gifted, who have luck, and they are very important for the ritual, you know, for the ritual life, to perform some magic acts or whatever. Those who have luck and who succeed in doing things, like first visitor, people invite the lucky person, and then they will have success in everything. So I think almost every new value has an old value in its roots. I don't know whether you agree or not, but at least some components there are in every single value.
Mm-hmm. Hello, people outside the seminar. You have some questions? Anybody? No questions out from the bright world outside now? More questions?
We will send in written form.
Thank you so much for your interest, and I apologize for my English. For the first time I'm reading. I usually speak and see the reaction of the crowd, but it's so difficult to see the monitor. It's difficult. Thank you for your
Thank you, Irina, so much, and it was great lecture and very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you so much.
And Yuri for technical support, and thank you for all participants. I am very sure that we will do it again, and see you next time.
Hope to see you. Embrace